Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's live speech and language Q&A session. My name is Marcy Melzer, and I am an intuitive speech and language pathologist consultant, and it is my mission to help as many parents as possible teach your late talking children how to use natural verbal speech so that they can share their wisdom with the world. I have many programs in my Waves of Communication platform at wavesofcommunication.com, including an independent study course, all the way up through getting handheld concierge level consultation support from a career speech and language pathologist to help you learn to teach your child how to use the natural verbal speech they need to be successful in life. And that's what I do in my Waves of Communication parent coaching programs. And how I get the word out and how I help parents who are not in my programs and who are in my programs is by doing these live Q&A sessions every Thursday. So if you're watching this on the replay, you are welcome to join me next week, every Thursday at 2 p.m. on Eastern Time, US. I am on my Waves of Communication page going live. So welcome to all the people who are joining me today. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the comment section of this video right now, and I will get to it. So I did get a question to start with today, and it's a very nice tie-in because I want to talk a little bit about the brain and language learning today on this live Q&A. I get a lot of questions from parents of kids who are older, and today is no different. I have a question from a gal who has an 11-year-old child who she says, let me look at the question real quick so that I get it just straight. It's Tanya, and she says, hi, my son is 11 years old. He can answer a few questions like, how are you? What color is bus? Etc. And he can say, I want cheese, etc. Morning, night. However, his speech seems stuck at this level. Any ideas? So, okay, so like I said, there are a number of families who reach out to me who have older children, and there are a few things that you need to understand about older late talkers that will help you understand how to help them learn how to use natural speech. The first thing is language learning gets a lot tougher for a brain after a child is 6 years old. You might have heard this in speech therapy and linguistics, and they talk about it in many, many areas of research that once a child's brain gets to be past 6 years old, it's more challenging for them to learn language. However, I have found that that may be true, that aging brains don't learn language very easily. In fact, we learn this as adults. As we get past 40 years old, it becomes even increasingly difficult to memorize things, retain information. I always tell people that I've learned so much that new stuff doesn't stick very well. The old stuff needs to get out of the way before some new stuff can come in. And it like I said, it is a phenomena that older brains are more challenged when they're learning new things. However, there is so much new information out about how brains learn, and being able to address these things with people who are actually having neurological challenges in their brain, like 11-year-olds with autism. So what's really exciting is that even with just language facilitation, there are ways for parents to excite the neuropathways in the brain that are required for learning natural language, even after a child is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up into their 30s. And there are ways to do it with language facilitation, and there are ways to do it with other technologies, including something called TDCS, which it's called Transcranial Direct Current Stimulation, which is a device you can use to stimulate the areas on the brain with, it's basically the same kind of magnetics used in MRI imaging. So you can use magnets that are excited to excite the neurotransmitters in the brain when they're targeted at an area and actually regenerate these neurological pathways. And that's called brain plasticity. Because what happens in our brains are so sophisticated that they learn how to compensate when things go wrong. So for example, if a child is born, or if a child has a head injury, a lot of times there is a period of time where they can recover. People recover after strokes. Things like that happen. And even children who are born with neurological differences like agenesis of the corpus callosum, the absent corpus callosum, or some of the other nerve structures that exist in the brain, if people are born without those things, they can be regenerated. And that's really exciting for families, of course. And what's really even more exciting is that there are people who are working out protocols to figure out how to make these changes in the brain that actually help the brain regenerate area and work around, sort of compensate for the parts of the brain that are neurologically damaged or not working to learn language. So what does this have to do with an 11-year-old? Well, your 11-year-old, like you said, is actually using language. They're using speech. At least they're talking, right? They're answering questions and responding to prompts. Like when you ask a question, the child answers it. And that is talking. But it really isn't complete language, because there's a lot of things that happen as kids get older that they're taught to say words for a purpose, i.e., say cookie to get a cookie, or respond when someone asks you a question, especially a familiar question like, what's your name? Where do you live? What color is a bus? These are things that you memorize, facts. And what's actually happening in that whole language conversational exchange when you ask your child a question like, what color is a bus? They have to access parts of their brain that go to, understanding that question before. Otherwise, how would your child be able to answer it accurately? So they must have had an experience of doing that situation. Someone asks me that question, what color is a bus? I know the right answer is yellow. I know how to access the right answer and say it when someone asks me to do it. And then when I do that, I get some kind of a positive jolt in my nerves. Somebody says, good job, or right, or yeah, I agree, or just anything like that that agrees with what the child says. It doesn't even have to be a reward or a cookie. It can just be a good job or you said that. Just by receiving that kind of a reward for that activity, that makes your brain at a chemical level, at a neurotransmitter level, want to keep doing that behavior, because your brain likes to feel good. It likes to get positive. It likes to get the right answer and get positive reinforcement, because when you get the right answer, you usually get some kind of positive reinforcement, even if it's just a smile, right? It's just even at the subtle level. Our brains are learning how to learn language just from being in the environment. And so what you as parents need to really, really be careful about is what kinds of words and what kinds of language environments are you setting up for your child? Because if you continually set up language learning environments that are exchange-based, say the cookie to get the cookie, do this to get this, answer my question to say a thing. Like, you're not asking your child what color is a bus to get their opinion about that. You're just asking them to say a word, which isn't natural language. But if you ask your child what they think about a bus, if they like buses, do they want to ride on a bus? That's a whole different kind of language. And guess what? People who look at language functioning of the brain on fMRI studies, they have identified 31 different places on your brain that are responsible for natural language learning. And these same scientists have also discovered that when you do this language learning that is all about say it to make something happen, or say it to do it, or following a prompt to answer a question. All of that kind of learning happens in just like one particular area, or just one sort of conglomerate of little areas, and it only teaches one kind of way to learn language. And if it's the only way that you're teaching your child to say words and have words come out of their mouth, then that's the only way it's going to develop. So this parent's question about my child is stuck at that level of learning language, it's because those other areas of the 31 areas that all need to be excited, only a few of them are being repeatedly excited. And in a child who has some kind of a neurological difference in their brain, whatever gets excited a lot, the brain's going to respond to. So the more therapy in one kind of approach, do this to get this kind of thing that's happening, the more your child's brain is going to build pathways to get really good at that, right? So some kids get super, super good at getting to that level of language, which is saying words to make something happen, even if that something happen is get a smile from someone because I answered the question correctly or I said the right thing. And so when they go and they learn to do all of that kind of development in language to just say words to make stuff happen and they get stuck in that, all the other ways that they need to communicate about their feelings, about what happened when you weren't there, all these different kinds of things, nobody's teaching those. And remember, in a child maybe with autism, especially with autism or any kind of a neurological damage that, might have been identified, either MRI or not. If your child looks like this, if they're stuck at that level, then you know that their brain is not being excited to learn natural language. All those other places are not excited. And so what is also very fascinating about this whole situation is that the same scientists who discovered that you can identify these different places that are all required for natural language learning, and even in kids whose those areas are in deficit, they can use an electrical current together with a magnetic device, a gizmo that fits on a kid's head with two sponges. It's called a TDCS unit. And if you know, by looking at the child and responding to the kind of language they're learning, just like I do. So if someone says my child's not saying words, or they're saying this is how they communicate, they drag me around, or to use this technology effectively and actually re-excite these brain areas, you need to understand what the child's language, their current language structures are, because language learning is very complex. Is it just vocabulary? Are they using verbs? What are the purposes they're using language for? And you need to look at the child's language if you're going to use it from a brain level, okay, instead of a behavior level like I do. I work with people who at the brain level to change your habits in your life so that you can change how your child's brain learns language. Right now, your child's brain is stuck. This gal who told me her 11-year-old is stuck learning language by waiting for someone else to prompt it out of him. After 11 years of people asking him questions, he just learned to wait for people to ask him a question, and that's his habit, and that's why he's stuck. He's never going to learn natural conversational language unless you facilitate it. And so what's great and exciting about it is that you can. You absolutely can, even in a brain that's older than 6 years old, if you do the right kind of intervention. Because remember, there's 31 different places in the brain that are required to be activated for a child to learn natural language. And if a parent's only activating 2 of them because they're just doing prompt-based learning, they're missing all those other opportunities, and the child's brain doesn't have a chance to learn those things. And if those things are already deficit in the child, then they're going to slide towards those habits of compensation, which is their physical things like dragging the parent to something. It all means something. It's all communication, because your child is obviously interested. Most kids are super smart and interested in making you understand what they need and want, and they'll do it one way or another. And all of that is communication, all of it. But if you don't do the right kind of facilitation, you can't turn that into verbal speech if that's what you want. Like, you can turn it with behaviors into exchange for use a word to get what you want instead of drag you across the room to get what you want if you prompt that, but it's never going to move past it because you haven't excited those other areas. And what's cool is language facilitation. The way I teach parents to do this language facilitation is working. And even the man who developed this device, the protocol, who found those 31 spaces and developed the protocol on how to look at a child, analyze a child's language to determine where to put the current, they use the current for a short period of time and they see changes rapidly. And it's not just the current, because the current doesn't work by itself. It has to be combined with language facilitation, because I've proven with families in my program, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids who were previously diagnosed as completely nonverbal kids, given nonverbal communication system because they were told they weren't wired for language. And it might be true. It might be true that their language wiring is on the fritz, that it's not working, because that's what neurological differences are. When we talk about a child who's not neurotypical, their brain systems aren't normal, aren't typical like other people. So the functions that learn language are not excited in kids like that as they are in kids who are neurotypical. And so what we've learned, what the scientists have learned, is that when you combine the placement, but the placement also has to match the language structure that you do with the child. So this is a fascinating evolution that's coming out. And what's so great is that it's going to be available for people right now. If you want to get it and use language facilitation in combination with TDCS, you have to go to New York and see Dr. Harry Schneider. And I'm going to be doing a video. Actually, I've already done an interview with him. That's how I learned out about this, because I researched it and I met Dr. Harry and I started talking to him. And on Monday's Wave of the Week, I've done a whole 20-minute video that explains what it is, how it works, and all of that. So stay tuned for more information about language facilitation and TDCS on my page. And I have a question. So if you have an older child, you need to use language facilitation. And if you want to know how to do language facilitation, you jump on my YouTube channel and get strategies, and you learn about looking at language from the child's perspective. And if you want to know exactly how to do it, then you join my programs and I can teach you. All right, Angela has a question. She says, my son is emerging with his 2 to 3 word combos. Great. He's slightly delayed with his speech. Do you have any insight on a 3-year-old still drooling? Tips and advice would be helpful. Okay, so the child's already talking, so we're kind of have 2 different questions here. She didn't ask about language. She must be happy because he's using these 2 to 3 word phrases. Hopefully they're independent phrases that he's using to talk about everything, and that's because you're doing language facilitation, which is great. But she still has this issue with drooling. And you know, anytime there's a physiological problem where there's something not going on, it can be physiological and it also can be habitual behavior. So that's what the first thing you need to figure out, because I can't evaluate your son to see if those oral motor structures are actually impaired. But the way that I coach families in how to do it is to evaluate how does he do with eating and drinking. So things like drinking from a straw, is he getting his mouth around the straw? If he can't drink from a straw, is he holding a lip? You know, is he holding the cup with his lip and not spilling things out? Because if he can't eat well, drink with a straw, that kind of stuff, then the drooling, it could be a habitual mouth placement. So the other thing that you want to take a look at is the congestion stuff. So if a child is very congested and having to do a lot of mouth breathing, even if it's not consistent, they can habitually be in that what we call open mouth posture. Like that, where their just mouth is kind of always open because they've been congested so much that they're breathing out of their mouth. And then they're just out of the habit of collecting their drool and spitting it. And then it's behavior. So you're going to have to teach your child how to monitor and watch for the fact that the drool is falling out and how to manage it themselves by slurp and swallow and that kind of stuff. So you'll have to see, is your child able to control your saliva when you ask them to? Like if you show them how to close their mouth and swallow, can your child imitate that? I don't know how old your child is, but that's the that's the thing about drooling, is you have to figure out if it's a real physiological problem and your child can't. But you can tell if your child can close their mouth and swallow when you ask them to do it, then they can control their saliva. You'll just have to work through strategies to consistently, positively reinforce that control. So, and it often happens that maybe kids had a history of oral motor weakness, maybe they were intubated, but again, sinus congestion, head congestion can cause a child to have open mouth posture. A long time of intubation where the jaw has been open for a long time can force a child to be habitually in an open mouth posture. So potentially it's a behavior you can change, or potentially it's low muscle tone, and then you need to work on that. And you work on managing saliva by helping your child learn how to close their mouth and swallow. There's no extra exercises you need to do. That's how you manage saliva, is close your mouth and swallow. So that's what you're going to have to teach your child. If your child's working with a speech therapist might be able to give you some strategies exactly on how to do that when they look at your child and they actually see, but I couldn't give you strategies without seeing what the actual problem is. So hopefully that was the answer for you, Angela. All right, and then there is a question here from Shaukian, who is in my program, and she has a question about the receptive. A late talker can follow many one-to-one directions, but when it comes to group instructions, he usually looks confused. Any insight on this? Okay, so that's a really good question, Shaukian. It's definitely a stage in language development that kids get through. Kids like Shaukian's boy were very intimidated. A lot of times they're very intimidated about using verbal speech because they're not good at it. And that was kind of what was going on in her boy's case. He wasn't very good. He wasn't confident with verbal speech. And when she started to make it super fun, which, by the way, is the other thing that you need to understand if you were listening to me talk about that the idea about the neuro pathways that need to be excited for speech therapy. The thing that language facilitation does that makes this happen, that the electromagnetic current does, is it's the fun. Because the only thing that excites these neurons without any kind of outside stimulation is emotions and movement. So movement and fun, positive emotions. It can't be negative emotions, because negative emotions detract a child into do it. They talk, but it's not structured, because during the stimulation, while you move, because movement is one of those places, movement, positive emotions, and passive learning, where your child is listening and gaining from you without any pressure. Those are the things, the basic roots of language facilitation. So if you want to get started with language facilitation and your child is doing a lot of prompt-based stuff, you realize that as an interventionist, you need to shift away from prompt, which does one part of those 31, and move up to using the other ones with passive language learning by modeling the right words the right way at the right time with your child. And so with Shaukian, her little guy is at the level where his brain is understanding how to talk about things. He asks for things, says things like, I want to eat French fries, or let's go here now, these kinds of things, but it's not really listening. He's not really good at listening in a group of people. And so this attentional focus had to really develop. What happened in her little guy was he didn't want to listen to prompting at all. He didn't want to every time his mom tried to get him to say words, he literally looked away and went away from her. And she had to quit prompting and make things fun, so that now he sees her as the source of his language. And what I fear might be happening is that she's been so good at language facilitation and teaching him and saying the words that he wants to say, the right words the right way at the right time, that he's in the habit of using just her as a resource for learning. And so he needs to be, you need to have experiences where he learns from other people with other people together. So you're going to want to go to group learning experiences, kind of like when, you can do it when you go to visit at the museums, or, places like that where they do little presentations, story time at the library, where there is a group of kids sitting to learn, and sit right there with him. And even just talking in his ear about the story of what you're hearing. Oh, that was funny. Look at that thing. Like if the story person is showing you the pictures and talking about those things together, like conversation. It's kind of like if you're home watching a movie together and you're having comments about the movie. A lot of people don't like that because they're focused on the movie and they don't want to be distracted. But what's really interesting is when you even watch things together with your child and you talk about them, even if they're not looking at you, they are focusing on you. They're listening to you, but they're not focusing focusing on every word you say. They're just getting the gist. It's kind of like how you're able to have conversation with someone in the kitchen while you're doing the dishes. But if you want your child to move into any next level of language learning, so if you're stuck at any level, if you're stuck at the single word level and you want to move up to phrases, if you're stuck at the phrase level and you want to move up to more, conversational kinds of commenting sort of language that they're just requesting, each individual level, you need to demonstrate the language that your child needs way before you can expect them to try to say it. So you can't just expect a child to know the next grammatical linguistic structures to do. You have to demonstrate it for them a lot of times so that they can see it and learn it. That's how your child got so good at saying a word or a phrase to make things happen. That system, I do this happens, is established in your home. And if you want to have a new system for, instead of dragging you to the kitchen, we use words to do that instead, you have to facilitate the language that your child needs instead of those words. You can't just say, no, this isn't working anymore, do something different, without giving your child the strategies. It's like what I do when I say you can't prompt anymore, but don't tell you what else to do. That's not fair. You can't do that to your child either, because when you don't tell them what to do, or you don't show them what words that they need to be saying, they're going to make up their own. And that's what they're doing. They're just doing the best they can to communicate with what they have. Your job as a language facilitator is to teach them the words and how to use it in the right way. The words are in there. They just don't know how to put it together in the right building blocks. And you have to have all the right building blocks going, all those 31 areas of the brain, to teach a child to be able to build their own building blocks. But they have to see you do it before. So talking about the obvious, talking about this is a hand, this is a nose, the stuff that your kids know over and over again, teaching them the same stuff over and over and over again to get them to say words is like having this electricity opportunity to ignite these neural pathways in your brain and not using it. Because the only way the right pathways are going to get facilitated is when you do the activities that facilitate those. And so you can't think like, oh, this language facilitation is a good idea, but I have this other thing going on. No, you don't understand. You have to do this language facilitation in order to learn it. It's never going to carry over because you're teaching the wrong stuff in the brain. So that's what goes on with that. All right, Sehar says, Hi, my son is taking his own language, which we cannot understand. He says only 15 words, which we can understand, and the other language we cannot understand. Why? I'm so worried. And Sehar, it's because of what I just said. Your child is learning language the best way they can. And kids learn natural language from listening to their parents talk. Right? Exactly. So if you're doing things like saying, the cow says, then your child's going to learn to fill in the blank. If you're doing things like saying, your child comes to you and says cookie, and you're like, no, just say, I want cookie, and expanding that, then your child will do that. They'll expand it when you ask, because most of the time kids are compliant. Now, if your kid's having meltdowns when you do that, it's because they don't like it. And that's why it's happening. So what's happening with you, Sehar, is something is blocking your child's natural language learning. And in 99.9% of the cases, it is these habitual nonverbal thing. So what happens is when parents don't teach kids the language that they want to say, and they teach kids the words that the parents want to hear, kids find their own ways to communicate what's on their mind because you're not giving them the right words. And so this is what's happening. And so what the bummer, the situation that happens is that parents keep trying their stuff, only they just try harder. Because they're like, no, this is the word you say. And the child's like, well, that's not my word. That's your word. And that frustrates the child. And think about how you would feel if someone said, you were trying to do this, and someone was like, just to try to communicate that you want something, you're just trying to do this. And someone was like, do you want a drink? Do you want a drink? Do you want a drink? And you're just like, but look at me. It's pretty obvious, right? Look at me. And you're like, but do you want to drink? Do you want to drink? Do you want to drink? That person's going to think, are you blind? Do you not see me? You just keep asking me a question and I keep giving you an answer, but you're not responding to me. So I'm just going to try to do what I don't know the answer. Obviously, if the child knew how to say yes or whatever, if they had any way to tell you that they wanted a drink, they would have told you. They're doing this because that's what they know. That's what all children do. That's what all late talkers do. It doesn't matter how old you are. And here's the thing, the older you get, the more sophisticated that stuff becomes. Even kids, when they get to be, 4 and 5 years old, a lot of them learn to read before they start to talk, because it's easy to learn to read when you watch people reading and you watch words on screens. A lot of stuff is captioned. Kids learn to memorize and they learn to read before they're talking. It's a different language function that is stimulated by all the reading activities they're doing. But parents don't know they can read because they're not talking and they're not reading out loud. They're reading in their head. And this is what happens with language. Kids are learning all this language from listening to everybody talk. But just like they can't read out loud and tell you what they're reading, they can't talk out loud and tell you what they're thinking, because those activities were not facilitated in the brain. And this research, this fMRI research that says autistic children's brains, autistic people's brains, these areas are deficit. They don't light up. They are impaired. That's the neurological difference. That's why the number one indicator for autism is lack of language. And then when they look at it on an fMRI, they say, well, this kid must have autism because all of his language centers are not working, or the ones that indicate autism. Some of them do, the ones that can learn words easy, but those other ones are not. And right now you can fix it. You can at least get those activated started. At least you can head down the path. Even if you don't have access to TDCS that can actually physiologically help activate those neurotransmitters, you can activate those neurotransmitters with the right language facilitation activities, especially when you combine language facilitation with movement and music and activities that are language-based activities that go on. All right. Here's another question. Tamia says, hi, attending for the first time. Welcome, Tamia. So glad to have you here on my Q&A. She says, my 3-year-old has speech delay with some sensory processing issues. He attends OT therapy regularly and will be starting speech soon. He only follows some directions and doesn't say any words, only sounds. Also, he was born at 25 weeks. He hasn't been tested for autism, but I'm leaning in that direction. In the meantime, how do I help him with speaking? So Tamia, welcome to my page. I'm glad you're here now. You are going to find tons of resources here. The first thing that I suggest that you do is watch my free class on my website on wavesofcommunication.com, because that class explains what language facilitation is, why parents get stuck, what causes these things, kind of the stuff that I was talking about in a lot more detail than this Q&A. And then I also recommend that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and join my language facilitation resources group, because every day I put out new information and strategies to help parents teach their late talking children how to use words. And many parents with kids like yours have been able to get new speech and language from their kids using my strategies. Now, you talk about sensory processing, and I don't know what that means exactly, because it's identified usually by watching kids do behavior. But if that OT identified it and the OT is helping your child be easier regulating their emotions better, that's really the most important part about it. It's not so much the sensory, it's not so much I tolerate it, it's the emotions behind that lack of tolerance that is what blocks language. So if your child is anxious or worried because they're frustrated by the shirt they have on, their language is going to be affected. Their language development is going to be affected in a negative way. That's a block. It's going to block those neurotransmitters from going, because the energy, the dopamine, the excited neurotransmitters go to the emotion center for I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. And that's where the attention focus, all the energy goes, and that language learning goes straight out the window, because the emotions always take precedent over the language development. So your child, at any new intervention that you do with your child, if you want it to facilitate language, must be for your child easy for them to do, happy with no frustration causing get this, lose this, it must be happy, must be safe. because they have to feel safe that they're not going to lose their favorite toy or that someone's going to make them do something or make them work harder than they want. And it has to be fun. It has to be child driven. Your child has to think that this activity is fun before you even start it, or you're not going to get any language. And if any one of those 4 things is not happening in your language facilitation opportunity, it's not going to work. You're wasting your time because you're not addressing the right neurotransmitters. It literally happens that fast. Your child's learning can shut off in a second if they get stressed. So it is important for your child to be emotionally regulated while they are learning. And if OT is helping your child do that, great. If relaxation is doing that, great. If whatever you're doing, hugs and kisses, letting your child run, jumping on trampolines, having swings in your house, whatever it takes for your child to feel emotionally regulated and happy, easy, happy, safe, and fun in your life every day, that's your primary prerogative. Their health and well-being has to come first before they're even going to be able to learn language, which is why a lot of people do start OT before speech. So that was a good way to see that. So good. All right, let's see. Tamia says, let's see. So I hope that was helpful for you. There are tons of resources and strategies you can try. And if you do want, by the way, anybody watching this, if you feel like you have been watching my videos and you don't know where to start with your child, what I do as an intuitive speech pathologist consultant is I bring 30 years of working with families in just about every kind of circumstance you can exist. It exists for speech therapy. Hospitals, schools, orphanages, residences, poor people's houses, rich people's houses. I've worked with everybody who possibly could have a language impairment. And some of the things that are going on with kids are irreversible, physiological problems, things like that. And we used to think that a lot of these neuroprocessors that were necessary for developing language were, permanently damaged in kids with a diagnosis. But we're showing, even if it is, I mean, a child can be neuroatypical, and the brain is so smart that it does grow and it does develop and it does use compensation, but it 100% requires you to train it by doing language facilitation. So that's how it goes. So, and here's the other thing. Sehar says, my son spent a lot of time on screen. There's another reason that he isn't talking. It's my mistake that I give him all things now. He loves to watch, but not to talk, despite the talk in some cartoon language. How can I abandon this habit using mobile? So Sehar, it is important, you're right, that you need to get rid of the habit of using mobile. And that is one of the things that I teach parents to do in my language facilitation strategies. I have done a couple videos about eliminating and using video for language facilitation. If it's a real problem and it's an addiction for your child and you need significant help, then I highly recommend you join my program. I have an independent study program that you can do online. And remember, I talked about how you have to do this analysis to figure out what levels of language your child is using. Like, what are they doing to communicate, and shift those things into verbal speech. This is what I coach parents to do one-on-one. But I know a lot of parents don't have resources to be able to work with me one-on-one or face-to-face. So I created an online independent study program to teach you how to do it. But you have to do it. I mean, it's not an easy thing to set yourself in your child's shoes and look at language learning from their perspective. I can coach you in how to do it, and this is what I know how to do. The other thing that I know how to do as an intuitive is I can look at video and see what's going on that you're doing that are habits that are potentially keeping your child stuck, that are subconscious. Because a lot of parents are trying hard, working hard to get their kids talking, and they're not realizing that they're actually wasting their time and doing things that are not helping. And they're even frustrated more and more because, they think that they just need to work harder and do more work to get more results. And the problem is it's just the wrong thing. You have to do the right thing. So that's how it goes. All right, let's see. I'm not seeing any more questions now. So I'm just going to give one more chance. I'll be on for a few more seconds. There's a little lag on the Facebook, so I'll wait to see if anybody has one more question or two. You are welcome to post them in the comments now. I'm answering questions about speech and language development. Today I did a little talking about neurotransmitters and how the brain works and how you need to do that. You need to be focusing on the right activities to stimulate the right neurotransmitters that make these neural pathways grow and help your child learn how to learn. And then behaviorally what happens, because we do change the brain, and we must change the brain, obviously. If we need for it to learn something new, we need to train it. But in order to do that brain training, you also have to understand how your child needs to be able to participate in the activity. So the idea of paying attention to you and listening to you and focusing on you is what we have to facilitate first. And that's where tablet time and kids who are addicted, even if a child is addicted to movement and they're just, all they want to do is move, you need to figure out how to use what they love to be able to facilitate language. So if your child loves to run, you better be doing a lot of running while you're talking. If your child loves to build Legos, you should build Legos while you're talking. Not just talking about the Legos, talking about life, talking about your opinions about the Legos. Don't prompt your child to say words about the Legos, just talk about the experience. The language facilitation activities that are helping the parents in my program the most are the stuff that they do every day, because this allows you to stimulate those pathways in the brain repeatedly. So things like getting dressed in the morning, things like your car ride back and forth to daycare, things like dinner time, playing at the park, these activities that you do a lot, that's the vocabulary your child already knows. Your child already knows what shirt and swing and eat and pizza and all that stuff is, if that's something that you do. They just don't know how to access those words to use it. So while you access those things that you see, feel, hear, and touch, experience every day, then your child needs those words. And you have the opportunity every day to facilitate it over and over again if you do it the right way. If you do it the wrong way, you can talk your head off and you're not going to get natural language. But if you do it the right way, like the parents in my program, you can see new talking in a week. It's crazy how fast it works when you eliminate that pathway, because these kids, this is the thing. The motivation that a child has to overcome a fear of talking has to be massive. That's why if it isn't fun, it isn't fun. And your kid doesn't want to do something that's not fun. All right, here's Adriana. Adriana's been on my channel before. Thanks for joining me today. She says, my daughter is using more words now. Fab. She's even using a few sentences when she wants something, but I notice instead of bringing me over, that's really good. So you must be doing something right. But I notice that she's using her words, especially when she needs something, like she says, I want leche, or help please. But when I ask her something that I know she knows the answer, she doesn't answer, because it's just like what I talked about before. When she's using the table, you can hear her table, I guess tablet, you can hear her talking more. I don't know, when she's using the table. I don't know what that means if she's using it. So the thing is, here's the deal. It's just like I said before. Your child isn't answering that question because it's not a real question. It's just a prompt to say a word. But if your child is using natural talking, that means that sometimes you are doing natural language facilitation and she is listening to you. It's just when you pull out the prompting that you literally take it from the right things are lighting up, we're doing this, we're getting language, things are happening, growth is happening, new neural pathways are developing, and then all of a sudden you prompt. And it's literally like shifting the iPod. So you shift to do it, say it, do it, say it, do it, get it, do it, get it. And it shuts down. It literally shuts down. It's like turning the channel on the television to a different program that your child doesn't like. And what happens if you're watching the show you love and somebody comes in and turns the channel? Makes you mad. And so soon as you get mad, what happens? That emotional block. Because it's not easy, happy, safe, and fun anymore. And unless it's easy, happy, safe, and fun, those language learning things don't happen because the stressors get in the way. I don't like what you just did right now. And I don't have language to tell you. And you made me mad. So if I don't have language, I'm going to show you some kind of behavior to do that. And it could be silence. Because silence is a behavior too. We'll answer a question one time when I say, do you like how do you feel about this? Share your opinion. Don't answer when it's just a prompt for word. That's what you have to pay attention to. Any of you who are out there asking your kids questions, you need to think about, is it a question or am I just prompting words? Because if you're just prompting words, you are wasting your breath. You're wasting. It's not helping at all. It's not helping at all. These guys have proven it. At Yale University, they have studied thousands of people doing this, and they have them naming words, and it lights up one part of the brain, the wrong part of the brain, this part, the visual part, because they're too busy using their eyes to look at what you have or what you're asking them to say, and they're not accessing the words the right way. But as soon as you just start to talk about that thing, it shifts. And their attention improves. And it happens inside their brain and you don't see it. But you do see it. You do see it when all of a sudden you get that, wait. When you start saying the words that your kid is thinking in their head, it connects. Because it's just like when you and your friends say something at the same time, you're like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, remember? Yeah, you share an experience. There's that emotional connection that happens between you. That's one of those points. Of those 31 points on your brain that have to be activated that's why kids can't learn from a tablet. There's nothing to connect to. They have to hear it, they have to connect to it, they have to feel it, and they have to enjoy it. Right? Because they learn that negative talking. They do. They learn how to say bad things. I don't like it, whatever. But that's empowering for them. That's what they need, the words they need. Your kids want to learn the words they want to say instead of the words that you want to teach them. And the faster you realize that, the faster you're going to see language. End of. That's always how it happens. Okay, everybody. I've been on here for 45 minutes. I think it's time to close out this live Q&A for today. If you have questions and you're watching on the replay, you can certainly join me next week, every Thursday at 2 p.m. for my live Q&A. If you're interested in working with me, please check out my free class over on my website, wavesofcommunication.com. And you can get strategies on my YouTube channel, almost 200 videos over there, huge resource, exclusive videos that are nowhere else, that are in my language facilitation resources group, that are end of strategies. Those are just demo strategies of me doing language facilitation. So you can just watch it and learn. Those resources are available. And then, like I said, if you want to work with me, you can find out all about all of my programs, from the independent study all the way up through concierge. I hold your hand, tell you exactly how to do the whole thing. And the most expensive program is only $3,000 for lifetime access to this kind of coaching, where I tell you exactly how to do it for your child. And the least expensive version is only $500, where you can learn everything you learn in my, how to make your own plan, how to do your own analysis, and how to move forward. So if you've been watching my videos and they've been helping you, but you need more structure, potentially the independent study course could be for you. And so let me know if you want to talk to me or have any information, that you have any questions about the programs or what's going on. You can reach out to me in email at marcy@wavesofcommunication.com, MARCI, or you can send me a instant message here on Facebook. A lot of people do that, or you can contact me through my website too. So I'll see you all on my next video. Thanks so much, and dig in and do some language facilitation, but make sure you have fun or you're going to be wasting your time. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you all in my next video.